in fear. It is. It's crazy how loud it is. All right. So let's look at where did we finish yesterday? So we got Trenton and Princeton, Turning Point battle. Did we get any past that?
The second act. Like when he followed from Princeton, then he went over like through
He wouldn't say to Morristown.
that was retreated from the staff of the second act.
Oh, so we got both battles. Did I tell you this? It's convinced citizens of the US, this new country, patriots, we can win, we're in the fight.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize what a big deal it was. There's kind of like turning points. And even though it's not like the war got easier, we can win a battle. After New York, we can win. Now we need one more big victory to convince the world we can win. So let's get to British strategy in 1775. And it's a pretty good strategy. Take New York, go up the Hudson River. Take New York. General Howe and the forces in New York will advance up the Hudson towards Albany. Albany then was a small little town, now it's capital of New York. And General Burgoyne, a very confident general, will advance from Canada along the traditional invasion route using Lake Champlain. There were Ticonderogas right there, and meet him here. And this will cut off New England from the rest of the colonies. At least that's the thought. It's one of these that look good on a map, but how do you actually cut it off unless you have troops all along the river? They didn't have enough, but it's on paper, it looked like a good plan. But General Howe looked at this plan. He's sitting in New York, got it from London, in spring of 1777, and he's like, I don't like that plan. The Continental Congress is in Philadelphia. There's Howe thinking. Howe, Continental Congress is Philadelphia. Why don't I just take their capital and the war's over? And he went to his brother, Admiral Howe, and said, let's go to Philadelphia. So without telling anybody, that summer, he doesn't go north. Burgoyne and over 10,000 men are advancing through the wild wilderness. We're not going to worry, this is another talk. All we care about is Burgoyne today. And Howe goes to Philadelphia. He sails up the Chesapeake, Admiral Howe, and they advance overland towards Philadelphia. They do a diversion on the Delaware and advance overland. Washington, with mostly militia, are there to meet him. And they use the Royal Navy. Here's the thing. With the Royal Navy, they can go anywhere they want to go. It's a great advantage, but they don't have enough men to hold everywhere. The Continental Congress is freaking out. And they already kind of want to fire Washington, and then they blame him for everything, but they're in Philadelphia going nuts. Washington advanced out south of Philadelphia, right here at a place called Brandywine, and fails. Once again, he left his flanks hanging. His army was almost destroyed. He saved it, but Philadelphia falls. But a month after, in October, there would be a fight north of Philadelphia because Washington's army survived, called Germantown. This is Germantown right here. Don't really see much. Washington's army fought. They lost, but they fought. Stay in the fight. And here's the thing. Howe marched into Philadelphia towards the Continental Congress. They ran away to York, Pennsylvania, and kept meeting. They don't need to win. They just have to survive. They could take Philadelphia, but they're still going. And it showed the problems the British have. They could go anywhere, but they can't hold everywhere. They have such a difficult task if the colonists can survive, meaning they need supplies. So while that's happening, Burgoyne is marching this way, past Lake Champlain, took Ticonderoga, and by the time he got here, it's fall, running out of food. He's out in the middle of the wild wilderness of northern New York. It's rugged, there's mountains, have this massive river on one side, so it's not, it kind of limits your ability to maneuver. It has a river and mountains. You go there, it's really rugged. And he's out in the middle of nowhere. And that's when he realizes that September, I'm alone, and Howe isn't going nowhere. He doesn't want to retreat, especially it'll be November by the time he gets here. I think you see the problem. So he's got to get to Albany. Albany, right here. He's got to get to a little town that hold up for the winter. He's in real trouble. Every continental militia, a few of the trained forces are organizing there to stop him. And they don't need to destroy the British. They just got to stop them. The British are nearly out of supplies. There's 3 separate battles that we lump together as one as the Battle of Saratoga. The commander of the Continental Forces was General Horatio Gates. Gates was a former British officer, so they assumed, oh, you have a commission in the British Army, you must be smart. As it would turn out, he was an inept fool, but all he had to do was hold out. His second in command was Benedict Arnold. So Bemis Heights is here, and he can hold here, and these are positions that Burgoyne took. Burgoyne has got to attack here. Basically, it's got to get south this way. I don't know why I put that map up with regard to explain. But perfect place to defend. These are really rugged, hard fought battles. The first 2 battles, Burgoyne is just trying to find a weak spot. But the third one, he's got to defeat him. He has no choice. So the third battle of Saratoga, so much as they call it the Battle of Bemis Heights, the British begin to win. They break through the Continental lines. Benedict Arnold was second in command, and he and Gates fought all the time. Arnold thought Gates was an idiot. He thought Gates was a coward and a fool. And he let him know. Arnold couldn't keep his mouth shut. And so Gates had him arrested, and he put him in a tent under arrest. Tent arrest. So, Arnold. And Arnold is in the tent watching this go on. And he could see when the British broke through, all of a sudden the militia and the men just started running. They just start taking off running. He could see it. And he just storms out on his own. And this is like something from a movie. A riderless horse came by and he grabbed the reins, had a swung on the horse. And there was a sword in the scabbard on the saddle. So he pulled out the sword and using the flat end of the sword, started just screaming at the men fleeing and hitting them with a blunt end, just flatting, hitting them. Get back and fight as he's running. Get back and fight and screaming every curse word in the great book of curse words of 1777. Okay, there might be many of the words you know today. Let me phrase that. You would never say it. Some of them do. And all the unique ones for 1777. Hey, every generation comes up with new curse words. It's a great
I
thing.
have that book.
Huh?
I have that book.
Wow, what does that say about you?
But they,
Well, the men rallied. And they were able, this is a picture of him. Here's a watercolor, even though they didn't have uniforms. They just had whatever clothes they had. And they were able to give little groups to stop the British. The British were so exhausted, they just couldn't go on any further. Saratoga held victory. Benedict Arnold was horribly wounded and would take him over a year and a half to recover. But this is not against a rear guard like a Trenton or Princeton. This is against a main force and a competent general. The U.S. can win. It's not we're in the fight. We can win. It's not so much for the United States, even though this would be huge. It's Saratoga's victory. This is like returning point, even though there's still 6 more years of war. Who does it convince? Well, Burgoyne, this is a painting of Burgoyne surrendering. And this, if you go to the United States Capitol, it's a massive painting. It's on the rotunda of the Capitol. It's a huge painting. So if you go to the US Capitol, most people think it's another battle, Yorktown, but it's Gates accepting Burgoyne's surrender. Because who entered the war? 1778, the Franco-American alliance was signed. France jumped in, and France had an autocratic king. Louis XVI. They want nothing to do with that kind of idea of a republic or rights in France, but he hated the British so much they joined in. And then who else joined in? The Spanish are like, yeah, we're in too. We hate the British. And the Dutch join in. Overnight, the war goes from being a localized colonial rebellion to a worldwide fight. They're fighting in the Caribbean, they're fighting in Canada, they're fighting in the Mediterranean, in South Africa, in India. It's all over. Not so much in Europe, even though there would be a little bit. So like, for example, Spanish forces begin to attack their old colony of Florida. So the British are drawn here. The French threaten Caribbean islands. Remember, the French kept 3 islands after the Treaty of Paris of 1763. So worldwide. And the British have to totally change tactics. Speaking of Benedict Arnold, oh, I almost forgot. The French provided them money. No longer did not money. They provided gold. They didn't spend it all that wisely, but they provided it, but also weapons and men. By the end of the war, over half of Washington's army were French. Without French support, meaning the supplies allowed Washington to survive, it's almost impossible to imagine the United States winning. Like I said, they just have to survive, but you have to survive. These kind of fights are really hard to win for those like colonial powers like Britain. If those fighting, in this case, the colonists have supplies. American Indians didn't have supplies. But everything changed overnight. Speaking of Arnold, oh, that's a statue at Saratoga. That statue, and that's Daniel Morgan, who's one of the heroes. That's Gates. But what of Arnold? This is all they have in Arnold. A boot. They acknowledged Arnold. But Arnold is going to become the most famous traitor in American history. And so the hero at the beginning of the war will betray his country. So that's all they got, a boot. So you have to go find it. And this is part of Ben's site. That's what it looks like. That was last October. And that's what it looks like, the Hudson River Shrine. It's beautiful. And it's kind of interesting because when I was there, it just happened to be the anniversary of one of the 3 battles. You know, sometimes you luck out for timing. And that's another picture from Ben Heights looking the other way. When they say something about the leaves in that area of the country, it's true. It's kind of amazing. Let me show you one more picture I took that day. Now this is right by Lake Champlain. So we're going to another part where the British were, and then we're going up, you know, my wife and I are there. I took this picture then right near there on Lake Champlain. And you know how sometimes you take a picture and it turns out to be kind of really good? Like it's like one of these like, wow, that's like a professional did it. I just kind of snapped. It was my phone and it turned out to be kind of amazing. So every once in a while you luck out and it turns out to be a really cool picture. So I'm showing that off. I'm not one of those people that people have the great eye who can see it. I just point and hope for the best. Moving on. Benedict Arnold never got the credit he thought he deserved. Gates took all the credit. Arnold was miserable and angry, convalescing, and here he is brooding. I thought that's it. And there's nothing more corrosive than somebody who feels slighted. Somebody who feels like they don't get the credit or being mistreated or humiliated. I think we all have been in that situation and know how that just eats away, especially when you're feeling this way and nobody else understands it. Or you might have accidentally slighted somebody and they're really mad at you and you don't know why 3 days later. You just builds. Well, he was befriended. Oh, I should have. The British evacuated Philadelphia and he befriended a bunch of loyalists while he was recuperating in Philadelphia. Why? They're like, we understand you. They treated us as wealthy loyalists in Philadelphia. He married the daughter of a very prominent loyalist family in Philadelphia. Arnold was really caustic, hard to deal with. And so a lot of people didn't want him around, but Washington knew his talent. And so gave him command of the most important fort in New York, West Point. So you might have heard of West Point. 40 years after this, West Point would become the U.S. military academy. So it's right along the Hudson River. The Hudson River makes a sharp turn and it's on this hill right here. That's supposed to be the ridge, but it doesn't quite look that way. New York City's right down here. And they had these big chains to block off the Hudson. So any British ship would be stuck by those chains. If you go to West Point, Those are the chains. And they're huge, these massive lengths. So it's really difficult to go. An important fort. So you don't need many men to hold the Hudson. Arnold was conspiring with the British after his, he'll get those people who didn't treat him right to give him the fort, to stand on the defenses and give them the fort. But the Major Andre he was dealing with was captured right before it happened. That's the spot where he was captured. And he had a letter from Arnold stopping the plot. Arnold barely escaped with his life. That's how Arnold became the most famous traitor in American history, by nearly giving up West Point. And he would go on to command Loyalist cavalry in Virginia. He made a colonel and was a very fine general, a fine commander. He would end his life in New York. But for years, I mean, to be called a Benedict Arnold was one of the biggest insults. So when the first two political parties were formed in the United States, called the Federalists and Republicans, here's an anti-Republican calling them traitors. And so it's hard for us to give the context of 1792, but that's two-faced. That's Arnold calling him traitor. There's Beelzebub holding his head. So someone calls you a Benedict Arnold, they're calling you a traitor. Back to the war. In the West, the Iroquois fought with the British. And this turned out to be a bloody fight along the frontier. By 1777, the colonists had driven the Iroquois back from Western New York and Western Pennsylvania. But the Iroquois and other tribes joined the British because they thought they would curtail colonial expansion. What a terrible position to be in, because the British were going to take their land anyways. But let's jump right, don't worry about that, right here. And then to get a claim to the West, the United States, 1778, 1779, sent a small group under an experienced fighter by the name of George Rogers Clark. And they advanced along the Ohio River. Here's a stamp acknowledging it. And these guys are using the same tactics American Indians, hit and run, using the terrain for cover, down the Ohio, and gave them a claim to the Mississippi River. And attacking every tribe they saw. It was a bloodthirsty, just cruel assault. But this is going to be really important for the United States at the treaty, George Rogers Clark. Now, has anyone ever heard of George Rogers Clark? You might have heard of his younger brother. We live in Montana. Huh? Lewis Clark? No. It's Meriwether Lewis and William Clark of the Corps Discovery. Yeah, his brother was William Clark. I get it. Lewis Clark, because we always hear Lewis and Clark. So, the British now having to fight a worldwide war, abandon Philadelphia. They realize it's not worth holding. And they're going to do what's called the Southern Strategy. Keep New York. They know, at least they think, there's loyalists all over the South. If they can link up the loyalist group after loyalist group, they think they can hold on to the South. Think of it this way. They hold New York right in the center of the North. They might not be able to hold this, but they want to hold those plantations. Part of the reason there were so many loyalists in the South was because of that whole thing about equality and either slavers. Not only that, remember I told you about 25% patriots, about 30% loyalists, everyone else was neutral. Most of the people in the South were neutral. They didn't think it was their fight. They didn't feel like part of a country called the United States. They were South Carolinians. It's their fight. But with British soldiers marching through, do you see how things can change? So the British totally misunderstood the situation. They landed down in Savannah, then moved up to Charlestown, named after King Charles, now it's Charleston. So and then for some reason I capitalized the O in North because I wanted to know. I'm leaving. So they landed here, and the thought was, we'll defeat any patriot force and move north. Now, every continental force they could find was right here linking up, about nearly 10,000 men, but almost all were militia. And they were under the command of Horatio Gates, the same Gates as Saratoga. They almost gave Gates the overall command of all revolutionary forces. That close. By the way, for the rest of the war, almost the rest of the war, Washington stayed up here to watch the British troops in. That's reason. So Washington's not here. So the British commander decides to march on South Carolina and destroy them. Destroy that, it'll be easy. Everybody loves the British Army. The battle, August 1780, would be the Battle of Camden. Just August is fine, 1780, Battle of Camden. And this is a picture showing British, well, maybe you can see what happened there. Gates is in command. One of the best British generals of this era, Lord Cornwallis, which is kind of an awesome name, Cornwallis. Cornwallis is in command of the British. And Cornwallis is a ruthless commander. Attack, hit hard, and he knows that British courage and discipline can win almost any battle. Remember, militia always ran, and Gates put the militia, put it right in the middle, and put his tiny experienced forces on the side. And his thought was he would be in the middle with the militia. Well, British forces hit them hard, and the militia began to waver and run. Remember I told you how Washington rallied the troops at Princeton, Benedict Arnold waving his sword. Well, Arnold mounted his horse, and seeing what happened, what did he do? Ran and took off. And what happened? A rout. That is showing the rout. American Continental forces just got crushed. The only thing that saved any semblance of the Continental Army, they ran faster than the British could run. And it got dark. It's the only thing. Cornwallis thought, they're done. But they didn't quit. Gates lost his command. That's another what if. What if Gates got overall command? He turned out to be an absolute inept general. So it's a British victory, but now what? There's still patriots all over. The Continental Army just retreated into the interior. He's got to get them. So that turned into a British disaster. Their supply lines were really long. They had to go all the way to the coast, and they advanced in the interior or got longer. So for food, they just got ammunition by wagon. They had to get the food from farmers. They called this foraging. So they would send foraging parties out, troops and cavalry, out with wagons, and they would go to farms and do what? Steal. And if they resisted, what happened? They burn it down. Telling everyone else don't resist. And if they fought back, and here is a patriot propaganda, but she is fighting back. It implies she shot a British soldier to defend her little farm. It's also implying that her husband is off fighting the patriots. But that kind of stuff happened. And if you resisted, they burned it down, or they burnt down your extras so the patriots don't get it. Think about if you're a little farmer and you have your just worked all summer and you have a little bit of food to get you through the winter, and then they come and take everything. You might not have cared what happened, but they created more enemies, aka more patriots. Everywhere they went. And they couldn't hold everywhere, so they would go through. Everybody would just grit their teeth and watch the British go by. And as soon as the British left, who came in? The patriots. Or the farmers who were acting like regular farmers were back to being patriots. Because everyone looked the same to the British. And the patriots, the Continental Army, resorted to guerrilla tactics. Now the term is still 30 years away, get my math right. But it's kind of what happened on the frontier. Hit and run. Attack supply line. Attack small units. And if a large British unit comes, hide. And then it filtered behind an ambush. And they started getting really successful, especially the most famous of these guerrillas, Francis Marion, dubbed the Swamp Boss. Great name. Gotta admit, that's a pretty good name. There's swamps all over South Carolina, great place for guerrillas to hide. And he could recruit all these people who had their farms burned. So that's statue in Charleston. That's a painting of him. But I like this one. Here's British cavalry. Sometimes they wore green uniforms too. And you see, they're hiding. It's kind of a little stylized, but what the heck. And every time the guerrillas would attack, they just disappear. And then the British said, well, we got to stop this. They would go to the nearest village and do what to it? Destroy it, creating more patriots. Do you see the problem here? Well, there's going to be two battles. Oh, Washington now could pick the command. And he picked his best, maybe the best continental general of the entire war in Nathaniel. And he took command in the South. And what Greene did is avoided fights, retreated, and trained his forces, as many as he could. So the British supply lines, that means longer. So he retreated this way into western South Carolina and North Carolina. And as Cornwallis followed him, think about when winter hits. They're running out of food. They're running out of supplies. But Cornwallis has got to defeat Greene, and Greene won't stand and fight. So there's going to be two U.S. victories. Small action. But remember, Trenton and Princeton stay in the fight. One, basically, just 2 months after Hampton, a British foraging party was ambushed, and this is trying to show the ambush. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the ambush. That's how big the forest was in the Appalachians. It's just a different style of forest that we see here. They were ambushed by basically hillbillies, furious that they're taking their food. There's no real command. They just swept through the trees and just routed a British force. Small victory. And then, a few months later, at a place called Cowpens, even a bigger British unit was defeated. Cowpens was named by the fact they had pins for. So Cornwallis is getting desperate. And so we're coming to perfect timing. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse. This is one of the most important battles of the war because Greene keeps retreating into North Carolina. Cornwallis is following, desperate and running out of food. He's got to attack. Greene knows him. So Greene can pick the battle site. Wherever Greene chooses, Cornwallis has no choice but to attack. Now, Cornwallis outnumbers him, but Greene can pick a place, get rid of that advantage in numbers. And that was Guilford Courthouse. Now, if you look at that flag over there, we call it the Betsy Ross flag. And she's given credit for it, even though we have no idea if Betsy Ross actually did it. But if you go to Philadelphia, they will tell you Betsy Ross did it. And the Liberty Stripes, the field, 13 stars. But there was no set way you put the stars. That wouldn't happen until we got to 45 states that actually had a set pattern. Well, all they knew at Guilford Courthouse is it was red, white, and blue, 13 stripes, and 13 stars. So that's the actual one. That's the Guilford Courthouse. That is an official U.S. flag. Once in a flag, it's always a flag. I think that's a cool flag. I like that one. That's pretty cool. Using the same tactics that the small U.S. force at Cowpens used. And I'll draw this really quick because you got to see it, right? Imagine a field, a flat field, cleared, but on both sides, heavy forest. How do we know that's forest? Not just green. Do you see the forest fauna? Animals. There's a deer, right? Rabbit. Rat. Land walrus. Moorland walrus.
Walrus.
Yeah, walrus. You can't shake a stick in North Carolina.
Walrus.
That's the point.
Walrus.
Right in the middle is a small rise. You can't see it unless you're standing there, but it's one of these things that Greene picked the perfect spot. If you're here, you can't see if men are here until you get to the top of that rise. And so, this is what happened at Cowpens. Greene put his militia and lined them up in two lines, but put his best troops here, kneeling behind the rise, so the British can't see it. And the orders these men had were simple. The orders were, "Is your phone out? Not again. I consider that rude. I am working here. If you pull that phone out again, that'll be personal. You slide to me. Not again." So, after this, their plan was fire twice and then run away. Because that's what they're supposed to do. British, they have to attack. They line their line, they had about 18 cannon behind them. And their plan was to march within 50 paces. Cornwallis realized he has no time. Twice, and then charge. They figure we got to get them. They're going to run away. So that's the plan. So they march up right here. They fire twice. The militia fires twice, and then run. And the British soldiers are like, "We got them. We've been chasing these people for so long. Let's get them." And so what do? All their nice lines break apart, and they come charging over the hill. And that's where Greene ordered his men to all stand up. And almost 2,000 men stood up together and fired at once, about 20 paces from him. And the British just fell in waves, just gone. And what did the British do then? Just took them totally by surprise. They turn around and run. This time, Greene lost control of his men. They were so excited, we got him. They followed. And this turned into, this is how I draw a map. Cornwallis realizes, if I lose here, the war is done. The war is over. The war is over. Does anybody know what grape shot is? And so just imagine 12 to 20 balls about that big instead of one big cannonball. So when it fires, it's like a big shotgun. Cornwallis had his cannon fire grape shot into the melee of his men and the British soldier, or the top men. I think that hits. I mean, it just rips apart bodies and just all. It's awful. In his moment, that's how ruthless he was. And what did Greene do? Greene realized, I did what I had to do. I don't need to win. So he pulled back, and Cornwallis got this heap of arms. He won the battle. And lots of their his men. And it proved, there's the last thing. British victory for the Southern strategy was a failure. Got to Guilford Courthouse. That's where I wanted to be. Good. All right. Please